high unemployment, falling GDPs, closing businesses. Recessions can sound like nightmares. They're not just nightmares in reality, they're also nightmares in our exams. They're almost a guaranteed topic in every single GCSE Economics paper. So in this video, we are going to look at how to master these slumps so that you can go get full marks in your macroeconomics papers. Hi friends, welcome to Econverse. I'm Abrar and I'm a fellow student who topped in my GCSE Economics exam last year in Oman. On this channel, we make learning economics simpler, clearer and hopefully a lot more fun. In this video, let's go through recessions. So let's get straight into it. We're going to be looking at a recession and understanding what a recession means. So a recession is defined as a situation where the real GDP of a country is decreasing for 2 successive quarters. So the real GDP has to be falling for 2 successive quarters. Now what does 2 successive quarters mean? A quarter is essentially 3 months. So 2 successive quarters basically means for half a year or 6 months. So for 6 months, if the real GDP or the real output of an economy is decreasing, that means the economy is experiencing a recession. In an extreme scenario, an extended recession is referred to as a depression, which is when the real GDP is decreasing for 6 quarters, so 6 successive quarters or 18 months. So for 6 quarters, if the real GDP is decreasing, you have an extreme scenario, and this is called a depression. Now a recession is when the real GDP decreases, so the real output of the economy, which is all of the goods and services that are produced, the number of goods and services produced, is decreasing. Now let's just look at a diagrammatic representation of a recession. So diagrammatic one would involve essentially again an AD and AS curve. So you have price level on the y-axis and you have the real output on the x-axis. So essentially how this works is there is a leftward shift in aggregate demand. So all of the things that are needed for economic growth, which is aggregate demand increasing, the opposite of it has to happen for a recession. So if we were to look at aggregate supply as this, as a Keynesian, let's just take a Keynesian model for now, and let's label it AS. And then when we look at aggregate demand, this is the original aggregate demand, so let's just call that, and somewhere there as the price level and the quantity. And then when there's a fall in aggregate demand, let's say there, now we look at the new output and price level has fallen. So essentially what's happened is quantity has fallen, the output has fallen, at the same time even the prices have fallen. So what this basically indicates is the confidence in the economy has fallen. There's now lower prices, but despite that there's still very, very low consumption and aggregate demand because there's no confidence in the economy. Now this could have been seen in the 2008 financial crisis, for example. Now that was the demand side shock. Now this scenario where demand decreases leading to an inflation, leading to a recession, is what you call a demand side shock. On the other end, you can also have something you call a supply side shock as one of the reasons for a recession. Supply side shock. So essentially, for the supply side shock, you have an indication of the aggregate supply decreasing. So here again you have real output and you have price level, which you want to label before you begin drawing it. And then let's again draw the Keynesian model for aggregate supply, and let's now label it. Let me just try that curve one more time. Okay, if we call this AS and this as AS1. And let's just have one demand curve that flows through both of them. So that is your AD. So now what can we see here? So essentially somewhere there is where the first price level and the quantity is. So let's just label that Y and P. And now in this scenario, P has risen and Y has fallen. So the price has risen, yet the quantity has fallen, and this is a supply side shock. What this indicates is, despite the rise in the prices, which is supposed to incentivize supply, there is a fall in the quantity. Now both of these basically illustrate how a recession occurs. Now let's look at some important consequences of a recession. Some important consequences are, firstly, the most obvious one is your fall in real GDP. Now this will link to a lot of the things that we're going to talk about. Now this fall in real GDP will now lead to higher unemployment, because now your firms will start laying off workers in order to decrease their costs and in order to survive. There could be lower standard of living because now many people do not have the same incomes as before. Then you can also argue that there is low foreign direct investment. This is because suddenly now your economy has slowed down, has stagnated, and is even decreasing in terms of your real output. So your foreign direct investors lose their confidence and they want to move their money elsewhere to more profitable areas. So you lose that money. And now overall there's going to be a decrease in AD, a decrease in AS, aggregate supply, and aggregate demand, which is overall going to be really, really harmful to the economy. So now we've looked at the consequences of a recession as well. So that is all we need to know about a recession and why economists and governments fear it.
If you think this video helped you understand economics better, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to join the Econverse. And also make sure to share this video with every single one of your friends so that they can also understand it. I'll see you again in the next video.